I never thought I'd be the type of parent who snapped at his kids, who got unnecessarily angry. But there I was. I was doing those types of things. I had a whole shelf of books of self-development and stress management that should help me with it, but nothing was helping me in those moments. Hi, my name is Freeman, and if we haven't met before, I'm a behavioral change coach, primarily for business owning dads. And this is my story. This is how I went from growing up as a whitewater rafting guide to now doing business coaching and behavioral coaching for dads. A lot of it started when I started reading biographies. This is really where my self development kick came out. So I started reading, or more likely listening, to, I think the first one was Will Smith's book, which may or may not have aged well, but I read that and then I read Kevin Hart's book. And these books showed me that there was nothing uniquely special about people who made it really far in life, and then anybody could do it. And even those who grew up with disorganized or broken homes could reach these amazing levels of success. Now, at this point in time, I was also making a big transition in my life. I was leaving the world of whitewater rafting. I was moving into the world of UX design, which is user experience design. So while I was reading all these amazing books, I was getting more into the other types of psychology and how our brains worked. And I read some incredible books. I read the classics that I think many people who get into these types of things start to read. Things like Think and Grow Rich. I started reading, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's another one that I've got here. I started reading Atomic Habits and all these other books and really fell in love with this concept of making ourselves better by using our brains to think differently and how our power of our thoughts could do things. And I found this concept fascinating. It was also during this time that I found my favorite book, still to this day. This is my favorite book. It's called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor, and I highly recommend this one. This kicked me into my love of positive psychology. And it really felt in tune with me. This idea that success doesn't lead to happiness. Happiness leads to success. And even though society has been telling us it should be the other way around, it's simply not. And it's all the data that supports that. So it really interested me. And I got really deep into the positive psychology realm. At this time, I was also doing some personal branding work. And I started doing a challenge where I was writing every day for a year, for 365 days, something positive and educational. So I was putting these out, which allowed me to reframe and reteach a lot of the things that I was picking up in the books that I was reading. It's a very fascinating time. I started a newsletter and I was doing podcasts. It was great. It was around this time that people started suggesting to me as well. They were finding benefit in the content that I was releasing. They're like, you should get into coaching. You're really good at this educational thing. So I did what most people do when they're doing something new, and I went and got a business coach to help me with, setting up what would be my coaching mission. Now we set up stress management coaching. There's a longer story behind that, but I won't get into it. But it did lead me to another amazing book called The Upside of Stress. And Kelly McGonigal's got an amazing TED Talk. You can just YouTube The Upside of Stress, check it out. It's really cool. And it got into a lot of how we can manage stress and maybe change our relationship with stress. And now talking about this, I realize this is an interesting way of changing our perception of something, which changes how it affects us. But again, that's getting deeper into stuff. So I got into the stress management coaching and I loved it. I loved working with clients with it. But then something huge happened and we had a kid. And it, of course, threw everything into the wind and changed a lot of what we were doing in life. And I put coaching on the back burner for a while. I didn't have enough time to kind of do it and keep it up. So it took a back seat. And it was fine with me because the stress management coaching didn't feel perfectly authentic either. It felt like I was focusing on a negative problem and not a positive solution. So it didn't sit quite right with me. So I moved it to the back burner, and kind of time kicked on. And this is when I began to notice that like I said at the top of the video, I was reacting in ways I didn't want to. I was reacting with ways of anger and frustration that didn't feel like who I was. And I never kind of had to manage it with like that before. To the point where sometimes I felt like the only way that I could not punch a hole in a wall was to leave the house. And I hated that part of me. I didn't enjoy that at all. Around this time, after about maybe a year or so after the birth of our kid, my amazing wife went to an NLP course, which stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. So she went and flew out and did this course, and it was amazing. It um, really helped her, and she came back with a ton of cool knowledge. And I remember she called me in the middle of this course, and she was like, "You have to take one of these courses. You'll find it super beneficial. Maybe even help your coaching and stuff like that." It's like, okay, cool. I signed up for it and booked my flights and stuff like that. It was been about a year later that I had to take the course. So I had all this stuff in place. The months leading up to me taking that course were incredibly stressful. I almost didn't go, and I can remember not wanting to go, but I'd already committed. I'd already paid the money. I'd already booked the flights. I was going. So I went, and it was really beneficial, and it was amazing. And I'm super grateful that I went. And when I was there, I was having all these amazing breakthroughs and transformations and ways of thinking. People were asking me, because we were all chatting, they're like, "Oh, what is it that you want to do with this information?" Some of them were coaches or hypnotherapists. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think I want to get it back into coaching, but I don't know in what capacity or how. So I left that course feeling very good and a lot better about myself and my relationship with my family. And I knew that those things were going to be better. And I remember driving home from my course, and I was on the freeway, and like a ton of bricks out of nowhere, it just hit me. And I was like, holy crap, holy crap. Dads need this. Because I was a dad and I could see how much benefit I was going to get from it. And it was so visceral that I had to pull over. I had to stop and just sit for a second and realize how important this work was going to be for other dads who were struggling out there. And let me explain a little bit of the why I feel so passionate about this, especially for business owning dads. A lot of the times you feel torn between business and family. This generation of dads as well is very, I'm super grateful to be able to spend a lot more time with our family, but we don't have a playbook for that. We've been raised by generations of dads and males who worked a lot and, weren't at home as often. And there's, of course, the stigma of males not being in touch with their emotions, and just kind of, anger is the only emotion you're allowed to feel as a male. So there's a whole backlog of generational teaching was missing for the males who are now being stay-at-home fathers and stuff like that. So it really rang true to me. I was like, this is a huge problem in our society that that men now have to face. And it can feel like you have to face it alone. I certainly felt very isolated. Like I should have the answers, even though I didn't. Like I said, I felt like I had books and tons of knowledge, but in those moments, that knowledge wasn't helping me, which is usually because we're locked deep in a subconscious pattern that we're not even aware of. So it's been amazing to help people with those transformations and into that work that I now do with dads, and I continue to do and keep learning about. And it's just fascinating. So thank you so much for listening to my story of how I got to this spot and how I am now where I am. And if you're a dad and if you're listening, I just want you to know that you're not alone. That you're not alone in what you're doing. And that you are doing your best. And you're trying your hardest. And people see that. And if you can believe it, then there is a path forward. A place where you can imagine yourself feeling more calm, more grounded, more present with your kids. You can feel like yourself fully at work, and fully at home. You can enjoy both of those moments without feeling like this contrast between the two. It exists, and there's a path forward. And if that interests you, I'm happy to talk about it. And lastly, just thank you so much for listening to my story. Um, I'd love to hear your story as well. There is information below about what I do. You can learn more about it. And if you want to reach out, even if it's just to tell your story, I really hope to hear that. Thank you so much.